Torn between obedience to her family and uncontrollable desire, she plunges into a double life, where pleasure and guilt coexist. But every choice has a price, and in the end, fate exacts a heavy toll for the impossible love they dared to share.
5 years had passed. Time, they say, is a remedy. But Serena knew that some wounds never close. They only learn to hide behind elegant clothes, rehearsed smiles, and freshly painted walls. Now, she lived alone in another city, a small but bright apartment, decorated with plants she insisted on keeping alive, perhaps as a way to prove to herself that she could still care for something. Working as a private psychologist, she had built a discreet reputation, loyal patients, and an almost always full schedule. For all intents and purposes, she had moved on. She even had a boyfriend, Tyler, a kind man, a systems analyst, the type who planned vacations months in advance and laughed at simple jokes. He treated her well, brought her coffee in bed on lazy Sundays, talked about buying a house together soon. With him, Serena lived the version of herself the world expected, the balanced, grounded woman ready to build a stable life. But inside her, there was an abyss, and that abyss had a name. Ethan. No touch from Tyler could erase that old fire. No shared laughter in cozy restaurants was enough to silence the memory of the deep voice that echoed in her mind. With every glance exchanged on the street, with every patient who spoke of loss, she was pulled back to that cold room, to those forbidden encounters. Serena had done everything to set herself free. She threw away letters she never wrote, deleted messages she never sent, and most of all, she restrained the impulse to seek him out, to risk some form of contact, a sign. The fear of her father, still influential, still watching from afar, was enough to silence any attempt. She knew he would move heaven and earth to destroy Ethan, to turn him into dust if he ever found out she still carried any connection to that past. And so, Serena lived by appearances. Colleagues saw her as a confident professional. Friends described her as sweet, determined, mature. Her boyfriend believed she was whole by his side, but inside, she was made of fragments. Sometimes, alone, she would open a bottle of wine and stare out the 10th floor window, watching cars pass by like hurried ants, and she would wonder what life would have been like if she had chosen differently, if she had run away with him, if she had faced her father, the world, the consequences. The answer never came. Only emptiness. "You don't seem here," Tyler would say at dinners sometimes. And Serena would smile, look away, say she was tired. It wasn't a lie. Her exhaustion was different. It came from within. The constant effort to seem normal drained her like a silent illness. In her office, she listened to stories of pain, abandonment, betrayal, and each patient, without knowing it, cut through her not as a psychologist, but as someone who knew intimately what it meant to be marked forever. Serena had become an expert at understanding others, but she failed at understanding herself. There were nights when she dreamed of him. Sometimes in her dreams, Ethan appeared smiling, without handcuffs, just a man, just human. Other times, he was the fugitive, running, and she screamed without being able to reach him. She always woke up with her heart racing, her mouth dry, and the same thought, does he think of me too? And still, life went on. Work meetings, quick trips, Sunday lunches with her parents, yes, she still visited them, even if the atmosphere was heavy with silence and controlled looks. Everything was maintained under a fragile layer of normality, like a glass table that could shatter at any moment. It was on an ordinary afternoon that everything changed. Serena had just finished an intense session with a depressed patient. She said goodbye, closed the door, took a deep breath, and walked to the cafe next door to grab some coffee. The sun shone weakly, a sign of approaching rain. She pulled out her phone, opened the newsfeed to distract her mind, and there it was, a headline in bold letters. High-risk inmate escapes in failed operation. Police on maximum alert. She scrolled down. The photo appeared. His face. Ethan. Serena's heart raced in a way it hadn't in years. A lump formed in her throat. Her eyes widened. She couldn't finish reading. It was him. He had escaped. She felt the coffee slipping through her trembling hands, nearly spilling over the table. The world around her seemed to dissolve. The voices, the cars, everyday life. Only that image remained. Fear, excitement both at once, colliding like fire and ice inside her, and the certainty that the past she had fought so hard to bury had just returned. The city was on high alert, and his name, once again, was on every front page. The days following the news were torture. Serena woke up before the alarm, heart racing, reaching for her phone on the nightstand. She typed his name into the search bar, reading every headline, every update. Dangerous, fugitive, hunted by the police. The words repeated, but to her they weren't just bold letters. They were knives cutting slowly, because behind every line, she saw Ethan. She saw the man she once knew, not just the criminal in the papers. She imagined him hiding in alleys, sleeping in abandoned cars, running down unfamiliar roads. She wondered if he was hurt, if he was hungry, if someone was there to help him. Each thought made her chest tighten, and one question haunted her like a shadow. Does he still think of me? Her carefully ordered life collapsed. She treated patients, but didn't hear them. She wrote notes, but only scribbled nonsense. She poured coffee and let it go cold without a sip. Tyler, her boyfriend, noticed her absence and tried to talk, but she brushed him off, blaming it on work. The truth was, every thought she had was consumed by Ethan. By the 5th day, the weight became unbearable. She was in her office, listening to a patient talk about an abusive relationship. Serena tried to focus, but her mind drifted to another kind of prison, one not built of walls, but of memories. The woman, noticing her distant gaze, stopped mid-sentence. "Doctor, are you okay?" she asked gently. Serena forced a smile. "Yes, I'm sorry. Please, go on." But the patient didn't. Maybe you're the one who needs a break. Sometimes, even those who listen need to breathe." The words struck her hard. Serena took a deep breath, swallowed, and realized she stood naked before her own fragility. The rest of the session was procedural, but she knew something had cracked. That night, she dragged her feet home. She thought maybe a bath would help her relax, maybe ordered the Japanese food she loved. She unlocked the door and, as always, went straight to switch on the lights. And when the room lit up, he was there at Ethan, standing in the middle of the living room, as if he had emerged from the shadows. His hair longer, his beard rough, exhaustion painted in his eyes, yet still him, still the man who haunted every corner of her memory. The world froze. Serena's heart pounded so hard she thought she might faint, and then he smiled. That smile, danger and tenderness blended together, the one she swore she'd never see again. And in that instant, she knew without a doubt she loved him. The tension ignited. Fear and desire collided inside her, leaving her frozen for a moment. But no words were spoken. No explanations, no greetings. They simply ran to each other. The crash of their bodies was brutal, urgent. The kiss came loaded with years of repression, as if they could reclaim in minutes everything life had stolen. Their hands clung like castaways, exploring skin, hair, familiar and new forms. Serena tasted him, breathed him in, and the world disappeared. Clothes began to fall, one after another, leaving a trail that led to the bedroom. Each piece torn away was a confession. "I never forgot you. I always wanted you." In the bedroom, the restrained desire turned into wildfire. Ethan laid her on the bed with urgency, yet with reverence, as if he couldn't believe she was real. His kisses traced her neck, shoulders, arms, leaving heat in their wake. Serena arched under him, surrendered, her body begging for more. Their eyes met in the whirlwind, and there was something beyond the physical. There was recognition. There was finally, "You don't know how much I dreamed of this," he whispered, his voice rough. She couldn't answer, only pulled him closer, as if she could fuse herself into him. Their first time wasn't calm, nor serene. It was intense, raw, almost feral. The room filled with ragged breaths, muffled moans, broken words. Every touch was an explosion, every movement a silent vow that, despite everything, they belonged to each other. Serena felt every second as eternal. The weight of his body on hers, the heat, the complete surrender. It was more than sex. It was the embodiment of years of suppressed desire, living proof that what they had was never just fantasy. When at last they lay side by side, breathless, covered in sweat and silence, Serena closed her eyes. A tear slipped free, not of sorrow, but of the sweet, painful certainty that there was no turning back now. Ethan brushed her face with his fingertips, gentle, almost reverent. "I missed you." He murmured. "Me too," she replied, pulling him in for another kiss. Serena woke with a start, her heart pounding, as if she had been torn out of a deep dream. For a few seconds, she believed that everything from the night before had been nothing but a feverish fantasy forbidden to exist anywhere but in her mind. But when she turned her head, she saw him. Ethan, lying beside her, breathing heavily, as if his body had finally allowed itself to rest. He slept with a calm expression, without the weight of bars, without the wary look she knew too well. He looked vulnerable, human, only human. Serena froze, watching him, the strong lines of his face, the defined jaw, the slightly parted lips that had set her aflame, his broad chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. The muscular arms sprawled across the crumpled sheet. Her gaze drifted down his body, and a quiet laugh nearly escaped her. She felt like a lovesick teenager again, rediscovering her own hunger. Covering her mouth to stifle her grin, she slipped out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake him, and went to the kitchen. The silence of morning was almost complicitous if the world itself didn't dare to interrupt the miracle of Ethan being there. In her bed, free, she opened cupboards, pulled out bread, coffee, eggs, moving quietly, though inside her chest, her heart still raced like mad. It wasn't long before she heard slow footsteps. Ethan appeared in the doorway, still drowsy, hair disheveled, eyes half closed. "Thought you'd run away from me," he muttered, his deep voice tinged with sleepy humor. She turned, and a smile bloomed on her lips before she could stop it. Warm, radiant, the kind that could undo any woman, but this time, it belonged only to him. "Good morning," she said, simple but tender. He stretched, rubbed his face, then dropped into a chair. "I'm starving," he joked. "After all, we trained a lot last night. Making a baby isn't easy work." Serena's eyes widened in shock before she laughed and shook her head. "Idiot," she replied, tossing a dish towel at him, but he caught it midair, grinning, then rested his elbows on the table, watching her as she moved about the kitchen. The scene seemed ordinary, almost domestic, but the gulf between appearance and reality was impossible to ignore. After a moment, the laughter gave way to silence. Serena, with her back to him, finally broke it. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice calm but heavy. He hesitated, looked around, drew in a long breath, as if weighing his words. "I couldn't take it anymore," he admitted. "I had to call in a favor with the group. I couldn't keep away from you. I was going insane." She turned, a cup in her hand, eyes sharp. "You asked them for help." Her tone carried reprimand, but her eyes were filled with worry. "Ethan, that's dangerous. You're a fugitive." He raked a hand through his hair, trying to shrug it off. "I can take care of myself." "That's not what I mean," she pressed, stepping closer. "You can't just show up here like it's some game. If they find out, if the police He cut in, standing slowly. He closed the distance, gently pried the cup from her hands, and set it in the sink. "You talk too much when you're worried." Serena tried to hold on to her seriousness, but her body betrayed her, heat rising, pulse racing at his nearness. His fingers brushed lightly against her arm, and it was like an electric current. "Ethan," she whispered, more warning than word. He smiled, that dangerous curve of lips that always disarmed her. "Let's stop talking about police and danger. Last night we nearly set this apartment on fire, and I'm not finished with you yet." Before she could argue, he pulled her by the waist. Her breath caught, her body colliding with his. His lips claimed hers in an urgent kiss, filled with pent-up hunger. Breakfast was forgotten, pans abandoned on the stove. Ethan lifted her effortlessly, setting her down on the kitchen table. The kiss deepened, hands roaming, bodies pressed tight, desire flaring again like wildfire. She tried to protest, but every word died in his mouth, replaced with gasps and muffled moans. He paused just long enough to meet her gaze. Panting, "I risked everything to be here," he whispered, voice heavy with truth that shook her to her core. "Don't ask me to walk away from you now." And Serena, powerless against what she felt, only pulled him closer. The urgency consumed them again. No reservations, no barriers. Outside, the world kept spinning. But there, between stolen kisses and tangled sheets, Serena and Ethan lived in a secret universe built on dangerous lies, forbidden passion, and a desire that refused to be silenced. Serena no longer knew where her real life began and where the fiction she had created to survive ended. At work, with the patients, she was the dedicated psychologist, professional, the obedient and proper daughter. She kept her posture, her firm voice, her smile at just the right measure. Deep down, though, she could hardly focus on the sessions. Her thoughts drifted to the small apartment where, behind closed doors and drawn curtains, Ethan was waiting for her. It was a bittersweet sensation, an almost physical relief, every time she opened the door and saw him there. As if at each reunion the entire world crumbled and was rebuilt. But along with it came the weight of the lie. Her boyfriend, her family, her patients, all of them believed she lived a simple routine, when in truth she was hiding a fugitive in her home. Ethan didn't hide his irritation. When he found out she still had a relationship, he became visibly upset. "Break up with him," he said firmly, without preamble. "It makes no sense for you to be with me and with someone else at the same time." Serena sighed, avoiding his gaze. "It's not that simple, Ethan. If I break up now, right after you escaped, it'll look suspicious. My parents will wonder. My friends too." He stared at her in silence, jaw clenched, then looked away. "Then at least, don't sleep with him." Serena swallowed hard. The demand sounded absurd and, at the same time, it wasn't hard to comply. When she was with her boyfriend, her body didn't respond. She counted the seconds until she could invent an excuse and rush back home, where Ethan waited with those eyes that burned like fire. The excuses began to repeat. "I'm tired, I have to wake up early tomorrow. I just need some time alone." Her boyfriend, still patient, appeared hurt but tried to understand. He even suggested a trip, a few days away from the city. Serena refused, inventing work, deadlines, responsibilities. Deep down, she knew she couldn't spend that long away from Ethan. The nights at home were another story. Ethan spent hours on his phone, sending quick messages, receiving short calls, always in a low tone. Serena watched from afar, pretending not to care, but curiosity grew like a flame. One night, after a longer call, she couldn't resist. "Who do you keep talking to?" she asked, trying to sound casual. He slowly lifted his eyes, almost damp with fatigue, and gave a crooked smile. "It's nothing you need to worry about." "That doesn't convince me," she shot back, arms crossed. "You're glued to that phone. I have the right to know." Ethan studied her in silence, as if calculating how much he could reveal. Then he drew in a deep breath. "The same help that got me out of prison was the one that allowed us to see each other in that visiting room." Serena froze. Her heart raced. "How did you know where I lived?" Her voice was almost a whisper. He didn't hesitate. "I've always known about you. From the first time I saw you, I knew what I wanted." She let out a nervous laugh, trying to turn the confession into a joke. "Are you saying you followed me? That's insane." But Ethan didn't laugh. He just looked at her serious, as if he'd said the most obvious thing in the world. Her laughter died. She stood abruptly, pacing around the apartment, her hurried steps betraying the shock. "You had people follow me?" she asked, incredulous. "Do you realize how sick that is?" He shrugged, indifferent. "It was the only way to know about you," he said with a grin. Serena put her hands to her face and burst out laughing, but not out of humor. It was a desperate, ironic, almost hysterical laugh. "Perfect. So we match. Me, the righteous psychologist, living with a fugitive criminal who spied on me. Perfect." Ethan didn't answer right away. He just watched her with that intense look that always undid her. "But you're by the side of a criminal, so it's not like you're that righteous." He tried to break the tension. A heavy silence fell between them. Serena took deep breaths, trying to control her emotions. "So, Ethan, what's the solution?" she asked, almost pleading. He looked away and for the first time seemed to have no answers. "I don't know." Those words hit her harder than any other. He always had something ready, a plan, a joke, a provocation. But now, faced with the question that mattered most, he was just as lost as she was. While Serena wrestled with the storm of emotions, the pressure outside was increasing. Her father, now even more obsessed with capturing Ethan, intensified the hunt. Police friends, trusted men, all mobilized. It was as if every corner had eyes. Every shadow hid someone ready to betray them. Serena felt the weight of the lie growing each day. She lied to her boyfriend, to her parents, to her colleagues. She lied to herself, pretending she could control it. Her heart told her to stay, to fight, to not let go. But reason whispered that everything was wrong, that each moment she sank deeper into an abyss with no return. Yet, every time she opened the door and found Ethan waiting, she knew the truth. There was no choice. He was the prison and the freedom, the fear and the desire, and she no longer had the strength to resist. The days slipped through Serena's fingers like fine sand. Before she realized it, almost a month had passed since the madness began, which had now become routine. She woke up, worked, smiled at patients, but her mind remained captive at home, where Ethan was. Every night, as she opened the apartment door, her heart raced with the same suffocating question: would he still be there? There were days when the situation made her restless. She imagined coming home and not seeing him anymore. Then she would rush in, desperate, checking the bedroom, the bathroom, every corner, haunted by the irrational fear that he had left without a word. Sometimes she found him in the shower, smiling at her frantic entrance, like a child startled too easily. Other times she caught him changing clothes, muscles tense, a playful glint in his eyes as he noticed her panic. "You act like I'm about to vanish into thin air," he teased, laughing as he wrapped a towel around his waist. But for Serena, there was nothing funny about it. The fear of losing that secret, that sweet danger that now sustained her life, gnawed at her. She felt as if she was standing on the edge of a cliff, and any gust of wind could push her over. One night, overcome by anguish, she asked, "Are you ever going to leave?" Ethan took his time to answer. He was lying on the couch, eyes half closed, as if savoring each word before letting it escape. "I think this is the safest place. No one would ever suspect I'd hide in the house of the very man's daughter who hunts me." Serena bit her lip. The absurdity of his words was as real as it was logical. He was right. Her apartment was the last place anyone would think to look. Silence, only the ticking clock on the wall and the sound of their breathing filled the space. Then, unexpectedly, Ethan sat up. His eyes carried that strange gleam again, part shadow, part exhaustion. "Serena, I never told you where I really came from." She turned to him, surprised. Ethan wasn't the kind to talk about himself. His answers were usually evasive, as if he were hiding more than he revealed. That night, however, he seemed willing to crack open the door to his past. "My father was a nobody," he began, his voice hoarse. "He grew up in poverty, with no future, no hope, until he found the mafia." Serena's stomach turned cold. "The Italian mafia," he confirmed, as if reading her thoughts. "That's where he sold his soul in exchange for money, power, respect. I grew up surrounded by men who only spoke two languages, violence and silence. They were my teachers. My lessons came from knives on tables, whispers in dark bars, and bodies that disappeared overnight." He paused, staring into nothing, as if reliving every memory. "I didn't have a choice, Serena. I was born into that world. If I said no, I would have been crushed. So I learned to say yes. And each yes pulled me deeper." Her throat went dry. She had never pictured him as a child, vulnerable, shaped by hands stained with blood. To her, Ethan had always been the impenetrable man, dangerous, in control, and you never thought of leaving, she ventured, her voice low. He chuckled, but it held no humor. "Leaving? There's only one way out, a coffin. I knew that since I was a kid. I grew up knowing it was better to be the predator than the prey." Serena stared at him, speechless. Ethan looked away, and for the first time since she had known him, something unexpected happened. A tear slid down his cheek. He wiped it away quickly, as if denying his own weakness. "I never imagined," he hesitated, "that I could meet someone like you." The words lingered in the air, heavy, almost impossible to believe. Serena's chest tightened. She, who had always lived in the shadows, obedient and invisible, was suddenly seen. She mattered me, she whispered, incredulous. Ethan nodded firmly. Yes, I grew up surrounded by men who swore loyalty, but I learned to trust only myself. Then I meet you, and you change everything. She couldn't hold back anymore. A tear slipped from her own eyes. Silent. For the first time in years, she felt her existence had meaning. She had never been special to anyone, not to her parents who only demanded more, not to her boyfriend, who treated her like an obligation. Now in front of a fugitive, a man marked by violence, she felt like part of a twisted, inevitable destiny. Maybe it's madness, she murmured, leaning closer, but I feel like it was meant to be, that we were supposed to meet, even in this wrong way. Ethan looked deep into her eyes, and in his gaze she saw what disarmed her: pain, desire, and a strange tenderness. He took her hand, gripping it tightly, as if he never wanted to let go. I don't know if I believe in destiny, he admitted, his voice breaking, but if it exists, then you're mine. Serena closed her eyes. For an instant, she forgot about her father hunting him, about the lies, about the double life. She forgot about the danger. All that remained was the certainty that, as wrong as it was, their bond was real. And so, that night, Ethan's past stopped being just his burden. It became hers as well. The days moved in a crooked rhythm, but Serena no longer knew how to live without him. What had once been only danger and prohibition now carried a different color, a different taste. They spent hours together, sometimes without speaking a word, only sharing silences that said more than any sentence could. In him, she discovered not only the strong man scarred by violence, but also the wounded soul hiding behind those intense eyes. Each night, their bodies sought each other as if they couldn't breathe apart. The simple act of interlacing their fingers was enough to make her feel alive. Serena no longer denied it to herself. She loved him, not for the fugitive everyone feared, but for the man who, in her arms, revealed the pain of a past too heavy to carry. But life would soon remind her that forbidden passions always come at a price. That night, past 9 o'clock, Serena heard the doorbell ring. Her heart leapt. She wasn't expecting anyone. With tense steps, she went to the door and froze. There stood her boyfriend, smiling, his hands full, fresh flowers and a basket overflowing with treats. "Surprise," he said, stepping in without waiting for an invitation. Serena tried to compose herself. "I told you I wanted to be alone today. Exactly why I came," he replied, already closing the door behind him. "You can't be alone when you're like this. I thought you needed company." She took a deep breath. Inside, panic spread like fire. Where was Ethan? Had he hidden in time? "I appreciate it, really, but you didn't have to," she insisted, trying to sound sweet. "I'm just tired." Her boyfriend ignored her, walking straight into the living room. He placed the basket on the coffee table and began opening packages as if he owned the place. He had brought wine, cheese, chocolates. He sat on the couch with ease. Serena's eyes darted around, searching for any trace of Ethan. She saw nothing, but fear burned against her skin. Forcing a smile, she moved closer so as not to raise suspicion. "Come sit with me," her boyfriend urged, already picking up the remote to put on a movie. She obeyed, trying to stay calm, but her body was rigid. Her mind split between the TV screen and the bedroom door, which remained shut. During the film, he leaned toward her. He touched her face, tried to kiss her. Serena turned away, pulling back slightly. "Not tonight. I'm not in the mood," he sighed, frustrated. "You're never in the mood, Serena." He tried again, more insistent this time, and she reacted instinctively, pushing him back firmly. "I said, stop." The silence that followed was sharp. His eyes narrowed. Then the outburst came. "What's going on with you?" he shouted, standing up. "You're strange, cold. I bring you flowers. I try to cheer you up, and this is how you treat me." Serena glanced at the bedroom door and froze. The doorknob was moving slowly, almost imperceptibly. Ethan. He was in there, listening to everything. Her heart pounded. If he came out, it would all be over. Trying to regain control, Serena softened her voice. "I'm sorry, I'm just tired. That's all." Always the same excuse. He shot back, bitter. Tired. "You think I'm an idiot." She bit her lip, nearly saying what she shouldn't. "I wish you'd just leave and never come back." But she held it in. "I just need some time," she said, forcing calm. He scoffed. "You know what I think. If I was someone else, I'd already have found another woman out there who actually values me." The words stung. Rage rose in her throat, the urge to scream then go. But she swallowed it down. The fear of Ethan stepping out kept her walking on eggshells. "Please, don't say that," she pleaded softly. "I just need space." But he refused to listen. "Enough, Serena. Either you cut this nonsense, or I don't know if I can keep this up." And furious, he grabbed the basket, tossed the flowers aside, and stormed out, slamming the door. The silence that followed was deafening. Serena collapsed onto the couch, defeated. Her hands trembled. Then she heard footsteps behind her. Slowly, the bedroom door opened, revealing Ethan. He walked into the living room with his face hardened, his eyes burning with fury. Serena felt the weight of his gaze and realized she was no longer just dealing with a frustrated boyfriend, but with a man capable of anything to keep her all to himself. She lowered her head, consumed by double guilt. She was betraying her boyfriend and endangering Ethan's freedom. And for the first time since it all began, Serena felt reality knock at her door. The double life could never last forever. The city felt different, louder, filled with hurried footsteps and sirens echoing at all hours of the day. Serena could no longer walk to the corner without feeling the weight of watchful eyes all around her. It wasn't just paranoia, the police were everywhere. Dark-tinted cars patrolled the streets. Raids erupted in the middle of the night in neighborhoods once forgotten, and on the news, the same headline repeated over and over: "The hunt for the fugitive continues." Ethan, his name was in every newspaper, on the radio, whispered by frightened neighbors and co-workers. But for Serena, that name wasn't a symbol of collective fear. It was her own private sentence. At the clinic, she tried to keep her face serene, her tone professional, but every time her phone buzzed, her heart raced. Panic. Was it news about him? Or worse, was it Ethan himself, warning he was in danger? At night, when she returned home, the streets seemed narrower, suffocating. She saw shadows at every corner, imagined footsteps behind her. But as soon as she opened her apartment door and found Ethan there, those fears dissolved in seconds. He was always there, with that crooked smile and the almost insolent calm of a man with nothing left to lose. "It's all right," he would say whenever he noticed her trembling hands, but Serena knew it wasn't. The net was closing in, and each day together felt stolen from a fate already written. The police operations intensified. One night, Serena woke up startled by sirens. She peeked through the window and saw patrol cars blocking off the street behind hers. Officers knocked on doors, searched backyards, barged into homes without asking permission. Ethan sat at the edge of the bed, simply watching her. "They're searching everywhere but the right place," he murmured, as if it were a joke. "You talk like it's safe," Serena replied, nervous. "What if they come here?" He shrugged, unconcerned. "If they do, I'll handle it. I always have." But she knew it wasn't that simple. It wasn't just a cat-and-mouse game anymore. This was a full-scale manhunt, and he was the #1 target. She barely recognized herself in the mirror, dark circles under her eyes, tension in her shoulders, a heart always racing. Yet even so, she couldn't walk away. With Ethan, she felt something no safety or routine could give her. It was more than passion, it was addiction, emotional survival. On a rainy night, he pulled her close in the living room. The two of them sprawled on the couch while the TV droned with yet another report on the escape. The reporter claimed police had new leads, that the fugitive had been seen in wealthier districts, and that informants were narrowing down possible hideouts. Serena shivered. "They're getting closer and closer." Ethan only stroked her hair. "They always get close, but they never catch me." "Don't say that," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "This isn't a game. If they catch you now, you're never coming back." He stayed silent for a moment, eyes fixed on the screen but clearly far away. Then he whispered, "And what if I told you I don't care about going back, as long as I've had you with me?" The words cut her to the core. Part of her wanted to believe in the poetry buried within them. Another, more rational part, knew he only said it because he saw no way out. The operations moved closer to her neighborhood. Helicopters now circled above. Police stopped cars at random checkpoints, and officers went door to door asking questions. One afternoon, Serena was coming back from the market when two plainclothes officers stopped her on the sidewalk. "Sorry to bother you, miss. We're checking some apartments on this street. Have you noticed any unusual activity in the building?" one of them asked, locking eyes with her. Cold sweat ran down her neck. She swallowed hard, feigning calm. "Unusual how? Strange visitors, odd hours, noises, anything out of the ordinary?" Serena shook her head, forcing a smile. "No, nothing. It's pretty quiet around here." The officers thanked her and moved on. But when Serena entered the building, her legs nearly gave out. She felt that at any moment her disguise would crumble. She climbed the stairs quickly, unlocked her door, and found Ethan sitting at the table, reading an old letter he kept. "They almost found out," she whispered, dropping the grocery bags on the floor. "I don't know how much longer I can take this." He lifted his eyes, calm as ever, though there was something else there too, a spark of determination, almost pride. "Then you'll take it, because I'm not leaving without you." She stared at him, torn between fear and desire. Ethan was chaos in human form, and she no longer knew where danger ended and love began. That night, Serena didn't sleep. She listened to the sounds of the street, every passing car, every step echoing in the hallway. The siege was closing in, and she knew it. But as she looked at Ethan sleeping beside her, she realized the cruelest truth. No matter how close the danger came, she could never leave him, because loving someone like him meant exactly that: choosing the fire, even knowing you would inevitably burn. The night seemed ordinary, but Serena quickly sensed there was something different in the air. The apartment glowed softly, candles improvised in glass jars flickering on the living room table. The smell of garlic sautéed with fresh tomatoes filled the space, warm and almost surreal. Ethan appeared from the kitchen with a discreet smile, a makeshift apron tied around his body and a pan in his hands. "Pasta," he said, raising the dish as if it were a treasure. "My specialty." Serena laughed, surprised. It was almost impossible to associate this man marked by flight, violence, and constant fear with someone cooking just for her. "I can't believe you actually know how to make this," she teased. "I know how to survive. And sometimes, surviving means eating well." They sat at the table, and Serena couldn't take her eyes off him. There was a hidden tenderness in every gesture, from the care with which he served the food, to the way he looked at her, as if trying to memorize every detail. For the first time, she felt like she was at a real dinner, like a normal couple, living a life they could never truly have. Between bites and laughter, silence also filled the air, but it was a comfortable silence, heavy with complicity. Serena realized that, here, Ethan let his armor of irony and toughness slip away. He became just a foolish, love-struck man, trying to stretch out the moment. After dinner, he pulled something from his pocket, not a jewel but a simple folded piece of paper. Carefully, he shaped it into a makeshift ring and held it out to her with the same seriousness as if it had been gold. "Marry me, Serena." She laughed, tears already brimming in her eyes. "With this ring," she joked, "it's all I have right now. But it's everything I am." Her heart raced. The weight wasn't in the object but in the surrender. It was the promise of a man who didn't know if he had a tomorrow. Serena stretched out her hand, letting him slip the ring onto her finger. "I do," she whispered, before kissing him with the intensity of someone who already knows time is running out. In that instant, everything seemed to crumble and rise at once. Clothes were left behind, and their bodies met, as if trying to merge forever. It wasn't just desire, it was tenderness, urgency, a desperate need. Every touch felt like a disguised farewell. Ethan kept his eyes on hers the entire time, as if trying to imprint every memory of his existence onto her. Serena felt the same. She wanted to memorize the scent of his skin, the way his body fit against hers, the sound of his ragged breath, the warmth of hands that held her as if afraid to ever let go. That night, making love wasn't just physical. It was soul to soul, two wounds recognizing and healing each other, even if only for a few hours. When they finally lay down, exhausted, Serena rested her head on his chest. Ethan's heart was racing, as if it too knew this would be their last dance. "Do you realize what you're doing to me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm trying to give you one good memory, something that will stay when I can't anymore." Tears slid silently down her face. She didn't want to accept it, but the premonition was stronger than any illusion. That night, for the first time, Serena felt truly happy and at the same time torn apart, because happiness carried an unforgiving shadow, the fear of loss. Before falling asleep, Ethan played with the paper ring on her finger. "Promise me you'll never take it off." "I promise." "Then we're already married." He smiled, but the smile couldn't hide the melancholy in his eyes. Sleep came slowly, and Serena allowed herself to drift off in his arms, knowing she was living something impossible to repeat. Deep down, she knew she was witnessing the beginning of the end. That night wasn't made of luxury, but of simplicity. Pasta with tomato sauce, candles in glass jars, a paper ring, a love greater than any vow, and above all, the bitter certainty that tomorrow might not keep them together. The phone rang early, ripping Serena out of one of those rare moments of peace. It was her father. His voice came low, heavy with a tension she recognized immediately. "Have you seen the news?" She swallowed hard, glancing around the apartment as if the answer might be hiding somewhere in the room. "No, I haven't seen anything." On the other end, silence weighed heavy. Her father didn't believe her. She knew it. "You know exactly what I'm talking about." Her heart raced, but still, she clung to the lie. "I don't, Dad, I swear I don't." His breathing grew harsher, as if he were trying to hold back anger or fear. "Just don't do anything stupid. Do you hear me?" Before she could answer, the line went dead. Serena stood frozen, phone in hand, her body stiff. When she told Ethan, she found him serious, his jaw clenched, as if each word he'd heard carried the weight of a burden he could no longer set down. "They're closing in," he said at last. That night, the silence between them was a minefield. Suddenly, Ethan's phone buzzed on the table. He answered without looking at her, his voice low, his eyes fixed on some faraway point. When he hung up, Serena realized she was trembling. "Who was it?" she asked, her voice barely steady. "The bosses." He rubbed his face with both hands. "They want me back at their hideout. Said they'll come pick me up here. I don't know when, but soon." The air vanished from her lungs. The thought of someone coming to take him away, maybe forever, made her shiver. She tried to speak but couldn't. She just moved closer and held him. They stayed like that, locked together, wordless. Fear outweighed every promise. The night dragged on. They didn't sleep. Their bodies pressed close, their breathing shallow, every movement carrying the weight of a last gesture. There was no future, only the fragile present, breaking apart with every minute. When the sun rose, Serena felt exhausted, as if she'd lived an eternity. She thought of skipping work, of refusing to leave his side. But Ethan, strangely calm, cupped her face in his hands. "Go to work, Serena. I'll still be here when you come back." She didn't believe him, but she wanted to. Her eyes welled with tears. "And if I don't make it back in time, you will." He forced a smile. "I'll be right here." For a moment, she just looked at him, memorizing every detail. The brown eyes shadowed with fatigue, the rough stubble, the way he looked at her as if she were the last thing in the world he ever wanted to see. Then in a burst of courage and despair, she said, "I love you, Ethan." His smile spread wide, genuine, the kind that disarms every fear. "I love you too, Serena." His voice was steady. Her heart broke and burned at the same time. She kissed him with everything she had, as if she could carve the taste of their impossible love into his very being. Then she left, and the sound of the door closing behind her felt like the beginning of an inevitable end. The workday was torment. Every minute crawled by, filled with an anguish she couldn't shake. Her heart pounded, her hands were cold, her mind replayed only dark images. She felt on the verge of collapse, unable to focus on anything. When her shift finally ended, she ran home. She climbed the stairs like she was fleeing from her own life, desperate to see him, to prove her paranoia wrong. But when she opened the door, the shock froze her. The apartment was empty. She called his name. No answer. She searched the rooms, the bathroom, the kitchen. Nothing. His clothes were still there. A few things scattered like always, but he was gone. Serena paced back and forth, her heart racing, her breath shallow. She felt like she was suffocating. Where was he? Who had taken him? Was he even still alive? She tried to calm herself, but panic swelled like a wave. She collapsed onto the couch, hugging her knees. Almost without thinking, she turned on the TV, and the world shattered before her eyes. On the news, the headline blared in red letters, accompanied by chaotic images, sirens, police cars, people running in the streets. The remote slipped from her hands. Her heart knew before the reporter even finished the sentence. And right there, in front of the screen, Serena realized this was the confirmation of the worst fear of her life. Death. She didn't even finish watching the news. She couldn't hear the details, couldn't catch the reporter's voice still narrating the events. Only that one word echoed in her mind, death, repeating, hammering like a silent scream inside her chest. Serena let the remote slip from her hand. The images still flickered on the screen, but she no longer saw them. Everything around her seemed distant, dissolving, as if she'd been pulled into a wall-less void. This was the end. If he were only arrested, at least Ethan would still exist somewhere, breathing, looking at the same sky. But dead. Dead meant nothing left, no shadow, no hope. It was the final cut, as if someone had ripped from her something that was hers but she had never been able to hold. For the first days, Serena didn't cry. She couldn't. She stayed frozen, as if her soul had left her body. She didn't speak, didn't eat, didn't answer the phone. Her boyfriend called, friends tried to reach out, family insisted. She ignored them all. It was as if the world had been left behind and she was locked inside a windowless room. She slept and woke with the sensation of falling, as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Sometimes she sat for hours on the living room floor, hugging her knees, staring into nothing. Other times she paced back and forth, not knowing where to put her hands, not knowing what to do with her own life. Guilt came in waves. What if she had done something? What if she had told him to leave sooner? What if she had told her father the truth? She replayed every detail, every moment, as if in repetition she could find a path that might have led to a different ending. But there was no different ending. Days turned into weeks. Serena slowly returned to doing the minimum, showering, eating whatever, sending short replies. But she wasn't the same. She was a body on autopilot, no light in her eyes. She ended things with her boyfriend coldly, without explanation. He tried to understand, insisted, begged, but she had no words, only a silence that spoke louder than any speech. She stopped going out with friends, rejected invitations, ignored birthdays. Her social world unraveled around her. Months later, at a rare family dinner, she sat across from her father. She was thin, with deep circles under her eyes, her fingers trembling slightly as she held her glass. Her father spoke loudly, as always, bragging about operations, results, arrests, and then he said, with a half-proud smile, something about Ethan, about how that criminal had finally been eliminated. The snap was instant. Serena felt the blood rush to her face. Her hands trembled. "You think that's something to be proud of?" she asked, her voice low. Her father froze for a moment, surprised. "What did you say?" She raised her eyes, and in them there was a hatred he had never seen before. "You killed him. You killed the man I loved." Silence fell over the table. Her mother looked alarmed. Her father opened his mouth, but Serena didn't let him speak. "I always hated the life you forced us to live. I always hated the lies, the fear, your arrogance. And now I'll hate you forever." She rose from the table and left before anyone could stop her. Outside, the cold air hit her face, mixing with the hot tears that finally fell after months of dryness. It was a senseless hatred. She knew Ethan was a fugitive, a man living in the shadows, but love never made sense, and that was exactly why it hurt. Her years studying psychology sometimes helped her name the stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. She could identify each feeling, understand each mechanism, predict the ups and downs. but it didn't save her. The memories came like punches to the stomach, violent, unexpected, knocking the air out of her. Sometimes she wanted to die, just to stop feeling anything. She went through all the phases, back and forth, like climbing a down escalator. She tried to be rational, to breathe deeply, to move on, but a smell, a song, a gesture on the street was enough for the past to surge back, showing her the wounds hadn't closed. The years passed. Serena became reclusive, wounded by life. She still worked, still saw patients, but it was as if a part of her had stayed frozen. No wide smiles, no future plans, no dreams of family. She met her obligations, but at night she returned to a silent apartment where every corner held a ghost. She knew she was doing her best to face life, that she had survived, but deep down she understood everything that had happened had broken her in an irreparable way. Still, something kept her standing, a thin thread of meaning. It was the memory that, despite everything, she had loved and been loved. An impossible, tragic love, but real. It was what she repeated to herself on nights when the pain was strongest. I loved, and I was loved, and no one can take that from me. It wasn't complete consolation. It didn't erase the suffering, but it was a way to exist, even in fragments. A way not to let herself disappear with him sometimes. When the wind blew a certain way on the balcony, she closed her eyes and could hear his laugh, smell the tomato sauce, feel the touch of his hands. She felt longing, she felt pain, but she also felt gratitude because for a moment fate had crossed her path with that wounded man, and in that crossing she had discovered something true. Serena learned to carry that memory the way one carries a scar, visible, permanent, but part of who she is. She no longer expected to be whole, but she knew that, in accepting what she had lived, she found a small way to continue. Deep down, she was aware she would never be the same, and perhaps that was the price of loving someone like Ethan. But even broken, she still breathed, and, in the silence of her room, she sometimes touched the empty space beside her on the bed and whispered, "I still love you." It was a forced goodbye, without choice, without farewell, but it was the only way she knew how to survive.